law at McGill, and he's a litigation lawyer who pleaded for Amseline, Multani, Rosenberg, and Lippmann, and he's author of many articles of textbooks in immigration law. And he's also president of Canadian Human Rights Foundation. He was from 1985 to 1988. Professor Gray.
Thank you very much. After the illustrious panel we had last time, I don't know what we can say. I'm going to go over many of the same things, but from a different point of view. The point of view of the impact that these things will have. I was touched by Susan Herman's statement that Canadians are nicer than other people. I wish they were. I don't really believe we are. I do think that at the present time we have a better system, a more just system than the United States. It's a part of our history. I think it may not have been so under Roosevelt, but it is so right now. On the other hand, what happened in Canada is that the Sikh issue was won in the Supreme Court. I was a lawyer who took the little boy, Multani, and we took him to the Supreme Court of Canada on the right to wear a kirpan in school. In other parts of the country than Quebec, the victories were easier, although not all battles were won. We still have problems with the photo ID. We have problems with helmets, with turbans instead of helmets on motorcycles in Ontario, but most of the battles were won. For instance, the right to a kirpan in the hospital, the right to a kirpan in all sorts of social and other events. And it's generally accepted. Everywhere except, and this is the point I want to make, that after the victory in Quebec, of course it's not like a victory in the UN committee. No one has any choice once the Supreme Court says you must tolerate the kirpan in school. But no one has been convinced. And I'll tell you this, I'm very active in political matters in Quebec, and I'm very pro-Quebec. I'm proud of my province. I don't think it's a worse place than any other, on the contrary. But the one thing that people do not disagree with me on is the kirpan. All the time they say, we like what you've done here and we like what you've done here. Kirpan, why did you do that? And that's the proof that it is not enough to win in court. I try to do it. You have to persuade the people and teach them about the Khalsa, about what Sikhism stands for. In other words, a victory in court is a sometime thing. You can win one, lose it in the future. We all know that some American judgments, notably on abortion, are in constant dangers of being reversed every session of the court. So just because you won a case in the Supreme Court, you haven't really won the battle. You've got to get Quebec to accept, and this is the fight, to show they should know about the reasons for the Khalsa, about the martyrdoms of the 17th century, about the tolerance in the Sikh Empire in the early 19th century, about everything that the Sikhs have contributed and what it stands for. For the attack that is made against me all the time, I mean, verbal attack. I say Quebec is a wonderful place. It's not. I'm not afraid of Quebec. But the criticism that's made is it's a weapon. Kids have a weapon in school, so they do not understand what the kirpan is and what the symbol is. I must tell you that in the argument before the Supreme Court, where the Quebec made that argument, that a weapon, even if it's not dangerous, is a bad symbol for children, teaches them not to respect authorities, etc. I said resistance to evil. I think if this were a clandestine court in Paris in 1943, we'd all understand the need for a symbol of resistance to evil. And I think the Supreme Court agreed with that. That the kirpan is in fact something that can be defended and shown. And that brings us to Quebec and France. What Quebec and France have, which is different from other countries, is they're not multicultural in ideology. Multiculturalism is the idea that English Canada has, with which I don't fully agree. I think there are other problems with multiculturalism, that there are many cultures and there isn't one. On the other hand, Quebec believes that there is a central culture and it welcomes other cultures, but it wants in some way to integrate. Not integration is a good thing, as long as it doesn't mean that the minority is eaten up, that the minority doesn't exist anymore. And France has the same idea, of course, the idea of one republic and so on. France, there are all sorts of things to be said in favor of France. People complain, for instance, that France is not always very kind to its Jewish community in terms of, it couldn't wear a kippah and get certain things. But is there another country in Europe which had 5 Jewish prime ministers in the 20th century? They don't pay any attention as long as you integrate it. So it's the question of integration that really bothers France, the question of integration that really bothers Quebec. And I think what we have to look for is a form of integration, a form of education that does not take away either from the kirpan or the turban or from Muslim things or from Jewish kippahs or anything else, but at the same time which makes those things part of what all the people see as being their society. It's basically a matter of education, of explanation, of missionary work, not to convert everybody to Sikhism. You wouldn't, the 5,000 people you've got in France couldn't possibly do that, even if they set out to do it, which I don't think they should. But they have a mission to explain and to teach. Let me give you another example. The kirpan is still very controversial in Quebec. I now have a new case where the National Assembly, or Parliament, refused to allow visitors to wear a kirpan. And I'm back in the Superior Court fighting the same kirpan battle in a different context with a slight danger. Danger that they'll say it's the privilege of the Assembly to decide what it wants and the courts can't intervene. So that's a more difficult case than the school, but it's nevertheless there and we're fighting. But I did a second case in the Supreme Court involving the right of Orthodox Jews to have a sukkah on the balcony of a condominium, notwithstanding the fact that the condominium rules said no. We won that one. There was a lot of, I heard a lot from all sorts of people saying, what are you doing? The sanctuary is such a nice place. It's going to be an agglomeration of Christmas trees, Hindu idols, this and that and everything else. Of course, none of that is true. The fact is that the Amsterdam case is now accepted. It's because there is understanding of what Judaism is and what it does, and there is not the same sort of sense of strangeness. So that in a recent case, for instance, the Supreme Court of Canada reiterated once again that Amsterdam, not Multani, Amsterdam is the symbol, because Multani is still controversial, even though they did it. So I think the task is to make certain that Sikhism is as well understood by the community as Judaism. There is no longer a fight over the sukkah and the condominium. There shouldn't. I'm equally proud of both judgments. I think they constitute some of the best things that I've done in my career. But at the same time, I wish the other side, the social side of it was done. So now the last thing I want to talk about, because I'm going to run out of time, is the Human Rights Committee of the United Nations. I was also involved in one of those cases. It had nothing to do with religion. It had to do with the rights of English speakers in Quebec. And again, that was a very sensitive issue, political issue. But what we did there is accepted right now. Very few people are going to tell me anything other than you did the right thing in the United Nations. They passed a law in Quebec in 1988, which said that notwithstanding the Quebec Charter of Rights, only French can be used on outside signs. You can't put, it's not that you have to use French, I agree with that, that's legal. But they said you cannot put it English, or for that matter, Chinese or Polish or Russian or any other language, a clear violation of freedom of expression. And that's what the committee found, the United Nations Committee. And Quebec screamed and yelled, very much perhaps in the way in which some people in France are now not particularly capable. They wrote an unpleasant reply after 6 months of this, but they complied. After a year, back and forth, can we, Quebec, we are the most dedicated to human rights, can we possibly have this judgment against us without complying? And they complied. They left, of course, the obligatory French, as they should have, and they said you can put in any other language as well. Now, as far as France is concerned, I think that too will be the result. I think it should go back to the European Court right now, despite the bad precedents. And the reason for it is, should bring the UN judgment to the attention of the European Court, because that changes the atmosphere. In Canada, in 1991, I lost a case where I wanted to, in the Supreme Court, where we wanted to prevent somebody from being sent to the United States to face capital punishment. But 10 years later, the court reversed itself, saying in the intervening 10 years, capital punishment became such an unacceptable thing that now we will not send anybody to the United States to face it. And I think you can argue that in the few years since the original Muslim judgment, the judgment of the UN shows that things have changed and that France should comply. Now, of course, France will not comply with anything of that sort in the next few weeks because of the strength of the Front National and because each of the parties, one of the parties is probably not sincere. Mr. Sarkozy doesn't want to comply. I think, and I keep my finger crossed, that in a few months, President Hollande will comply with the judgment and will not keep France outside international law. Remember, not binding, but France signed the special covenant. And the French know what it means to sign a contract. It's a great democracy. It's a country that has contributed tremendously to freedom across throughout the ages, and I think France will comply.